When a woke professor demanded Barron Trump state his pronouns, she never expected his calm, logical response to leave her speechless. What he said next turned the entire classroom debate on its head. The campus buzzed with the energy of a new semester. Students hurried between classes, their conversations blending into a low hum that filled the crisp autumn air. Among the crowd, one figure moved with quiet purpose, his tall frame and composed demeanor setting him apart. Barron Trump, now a freshman in college, had chosen this institution for its strong political science program and its reputation for fostering intellectual debate. At 19, Barron was already a young man of remarkable poise. Standing at an impressive 6 feet 7 inches, his height was the first thing people noticed, but it was his calm, thoughtful nature that left a lasting impression. He wasn't one to seek attention or engage in unnecessary conflict. Instead, he preferred to listen, observe, and speak only when he had something meaningful to contribute. Barron's decision to study political science was no surprise to those who knew him. Growing up in a family deeply entrenched in the political world, he had developed a keen interest in understanding the systems and philosophies that shape societies. But unlike many of his peers, Barron wasn't interested in following the crowd or parroting popular opinions. He valued logic, reason, and respectful dialogue, qualities that often set him apart in a world increasingly dominated by emotional arguments and performative outrage. It was in this environment that Barron found himself enrolled in Introduction to Political Theory, a required course for all political science majors. The class was taught by Professor Madison Harper, a figure as polarizing as she was passionate. Madison Harper was a rising star in the world of academia, known for her fiery lectures and unyielding commitment to progressive ideals. In her early 30s, she had quickly made a name for herself as a champion of social justice, often using her classroom as a platform to challenge what she called outdated perspectives. With her teal-dyed hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and a wardrobe that seemed to blend professional attire with activist flair, Madison was as much a symbol of her ideology as she was a teacher. Her personality was a mix of confidence and condescension. She spoke with the air of someone who believed she was always the smartest person in the room, often dismissing opposing viewpoints as ignorant or problematic. For Madison, the classroom wasn't just a place for learning. It was a battleground for ideas, and she relished every opportunity to challenge her students to think critically, as long as their conclusions aligned with her own. For Madison, Barron Trump was more than just another student. His last name alone carried weight, and she saw in him an opportunity to make a statement. To her, Barron represented the old guard, the privilege, the patriarchy, the resistance to progress. She was determined to challenge him, to expose what she saw as the flaws in his worldview. The first few weeks of class had been relatively uneventful. Barron, as always, kept a low profile, participating only when necessary and focusing on his studies. But Madison had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to engage him in a debate. That moment came during a lecture on the role of language in shaping political discourse. The lecture hall was packed, the hum of student chatter filling the air as Madison Harper strode to the front of the room. She adjusted her glasses and began her lecture with her usual flair, weaving together historical examples and modern-day controversies to illustrate her points. Language, she declared, her voice carrying across the room, is not just a tool for communication. It's a weapon. It shapes our reality, defines our identities, and reinforces systems of power. The students nodded along, some scribbling notes, others simply absorbing her words. Madison's lectures were always engaging, even if they left little room for dissent. As the discussion progressed, Madison turned her attention to the topic of pronouns and their role in fostering inclusivity. She explained her belief that using someone's preferred pronouns was not just a matter of respect, but a moral obligation. To refuse someone's pronouns, she said, her voice rising with conviction, is to deny their identity. It's an act of violence, plain and simple. The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Madison scanned the room, her eyes landing on Barron. "Mr. Trump," she said, her tone sharp but measured, "let's start with you. Please introduce yourself to the class and include your pronouns." Barron looked up from his notebook, his expression calm and thoughtful. He took a moment before responding, his deep voice cutting through the tension in the room. "I'm Barron Trump," he said simply. Madison's smile tightened. "And your pronouns?" she pressed. Barron met her gaze unflinching. "I don't feel the need to state them. My name is sufficient." A murmur ran through the room. Some students exchanged glances, unsure of what to make of the exchange. Madison's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice tinged with frustration, "this is about creating a safe and inclusive environment. Refusing to state your pronouns undermines that effort. Don't you think it's important to show respect for others?" Barron nodded. "I do, but respect is a two-way street. I respect others' choices, but I also expect my own to be respected. Forcing someone to participate in something they don't believe in isn't inclusivity, it's coercion." The room was silent. Madison, clearly taken aback, struggled to regain control of the conversation. "This isn't about you," she said, her voice rising. "It's about fostering a community where everyone feels seen and valued." Barron's expression remained calm. "I agree, but inclusivity shouldn't come at the expense of individual freedom. If we start forcing people to say or do things they don't believe in, we're not creating a safe environment. We're creating a controlled one." The tension in the room was palpable. Madison, visibly flustered, quickly moved on to another topic. But the exchange had left its mark. Students whispered to each other, some clearly impressed by Barron's composure, others unsure of what to make of the debate. The classroom exchange between Barron Trump and Professor Madison Harper quickly became the talk of the campus. Students whispered about it in the dining hall, debated it in dorm rooms, and even discussed it in other classes. Some admired Barron's calm and logical approach, while others criticized him for what they saw as a refusal to adapt to modern norms. For Madison, the incident was a blow to her authority. She prided herself on being able to guide her students toward what she believed was a more enlightened perspective. But Barron had not only resisted her attempts to challenge him, he had done so with a composure that left her flustered. Determined to address what she saw as a challenge to her principles, Madison decided to take a more direct approach. She invited Barron to her office hours, ostensibly to discuss his coursework, but with the real intention of confronting him in a more controlled setting. Barron received the email from Professor Harper late one evening. The subject line read, "Follow-up discussion." The message was polite but firm, requesting that he meet with her during her office hours to discuss his participation in class. Barron wasn't surprised. He had anticipated that their exchange in class might lead to further discussion. While he respected Professor Harper's passion for her beliefs, he also recognized that her approach often left little room for differing perspectives. The following afternoon, Barron made his way to Madison's office. The small room was decorated with posters and books that reflected her progressive ideals. A rainbow flag hung on one wall, and a stack of pamphlets on social justice issues sat neatly on her desk. Madison greeted him with a tight smile, gesturing for him to take a seat. If this story resonates with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let us know in the comments which state you're watching from. We love hearing from proud, patriotic Americans like you. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Trump," she began, her tone measured. "I wanted to speak with you about our discussion in class the other day." Barron nodded, his expression calm. "Of course, Professor Harper. I'm happy to discuss it. Madison leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. I want to make it clear that my goal is to create a classroom environment where everyone feels respected and included. Your refusal to state your pronouns undermines that effort. It sends a message that you're unwilling to participate in fostering inclusivity. Barron listened carefully, his face thoughtful. When she finished, he responded in his usual measured tone. Professor Harper, I understand your perspective, and I respect your commitment to inclusivity, but I believe that respect is a two-way street. Forcing someone to state their pronouns, especially if they don't feel comfortable doing so, isn't fostering inclusivity. It's imposing a belief system. Madison's expression tightened. This isn't about imposing beliefs, Mr. Trump. It's about acknowledging the experiences of marginalized communities and showing solidarity. Barron nodded. I agree that acknowledging others' experiences is important. But solidarity can't be forced. It has to be genuine. If we start mandating how people express themselves, we risk creating an environment where people feel pressured to conform rather than encouraged to engage in honest dialogue. Madison leaned back in her chair, clearly frustrated. Do you realize how harmful it is to refuse to use inclusive language? It's not just about you. It's about the impact on others. Barron met her gaze, his voice steady. I understand that words have power, and I'm careful with how I use them. But I also believe that honesty is a form of respect. Pretending to agree with something I don't believe in isn't respectful. It's dishonest. And I think people deserve honesty, even if it's uncomfortable. The room fell silent for a moment. Madison seemed to be searching for a response, but Barron's calm logic left little room for rebuttal. The air in Professor Harper's office was thick with tension. Madison Harper, usually so confident in her convictions, found herself struggling to maintain her composure. Across from her sat Barron Trump, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frustration simmering just beneath her polished exterior. Madison adjusted her glasses and leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly on the desk. Mr. Trump, she began, her voice firm, but tinged with exasperation. I understand that you believe in honesty, but there's a difference between being honest and being dismissive. By refusing to state your pronouns, you're sending a message that you don't care about the experiences of others. Barron met her gaze, his expression thoughtful but unwavering. Professor Harper, I care deeply about the experiences of others. That's why I believe in treating people with respect, even when I disagree with them. But respect has to go both ways. If I'm forced to say something I don't believe in, that's not respect. It's compliance. And compliance doesn't foster understanding. It fosters resentment. Madison's lips pressed into a thin line. So you're saying that your personal beliefs are more important than creating a safe space for others? Barron shook his head. Not at all. I'm saying that a truly safe space is one where people can express their beliefs without fear of coercion. If we start forcing people to conform to a specific ideology, we're not creating a safe space. We're creating an echo chamber. Madison leaned back in her chair, her frustration evident. Do you realize how privileged that sounds? You have the luxury of not worrying about how language affects you. For marginalized communities, language is a matter of survival. Barron nodded, his tone respectful. I understand that language can be deeply personal and impactful. But I also believe that forcing someone to use specific language doesn't solve the underlying issues. Real change comes from mutual understanding and open dialogue, not from mandates. Madison's eyes narrowed. And what about the harm caused by refusing to use inclusive language? Don't you think that outweighs your personal discomfort? Barron paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I think harm is a complex issue. Forcing someone to say something they don't believe in can also cause harm. Harm to their integrity, their freedom of thought, and their ability to engage in honest dialogue. If we want to create a truly inclusive environment, we have to find a balance that respects everyone's rights, not just the rights of one group. The room fell silent. Madison stared at Barron, her mind racing. She had expected him to be defensive, to stumble over his words, to reveal the flaws in his argument. But instead, he had presented a perspective that was both logical and difficult to dismiss. Finally, Madison sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I see your point, Mr. Trump, but I still believe that language is a powerful tool for change, and I hope you'll consider the impact of your words on others." Barron nodded, his expression sincere. "I will, Professor Harper, and I hope you'll consider the importance of allowing people to express their beliefs freely. That's how we learn from each other and grow as a society." Madison offered a tight smile, clearly unsatisfied, but unable to refute his argument. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Trump. I think we've both given each other something to think about." Barron stood, his tall frame towering over the desk. "Thank you for the discussion, Professor Harper. I appreciate the opportunity to share my perspective." As he left the office, Madison sat back in her chair, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. For the first time in a long time, she found herself questioning her own approach. The days following Barron Trump's meeting with Professor Madison Harper were quieter than expected. The campus buzz that had surrounded their initial classroom exchange began to fade, replaced by the usual rhythm of college life. But for those who had witnessed or heard about the events, the impact lingered. For Madison, the experience was unsettling. She had always prided herself on her ability to challenge her students and guide them toward what she believed was a more progressive worldview. But Barron had been different. He hadn't reacted with anger or defensiveness. Instead, he had met her arguments with calm logic and respect, forcing her to confront the possibility that her approach might not be as inclusive as she thought. Sitting in her office one evening, Madison found herself reflecting on their conversation. She had always believed that inclusivity required strict adherence to certain principles, but Barron's words had planted a seed of doubt. Was it possible that her methods were alienating the very people she sought to reach? She glanced at the stack of pamphlets on her desk, each one advocating for a different cause. For the first time, she wondered if her focus on enforcing ideological conformity had overshadowed the importance of genuine dialogue. Meanwhile, Barron continued with his studies, largely unfazed by the attention he had received. For him, the issue had never been about proving anyone wrong or seeking validation. It had been about standing by his principles and engaging in honest, respectful dialogue. One afternoon, as he walked across campus, a fellow student approached him. She was a petite young woman with a shy smile and a notebook clutched to her chest. "Hi, Barron," she said hesitantly. "I just wanted to say that I really appreciated what you said in class the other day. It made me think about things differently." Barron smiled warmly. "Thank you. I'm glad it resonated with you." She nodded, her confidence growing. "I've always felt like I couldn't speak up in class because I was afraid of being judged. But seeing you stand your ground, it gave me courage." Barron's expression softened. "I think it's important for everyone to feel like they can share their perspective, even if it's not the popular one. That's how we learn from each other." The young woman smiled again, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Barron. I hope more people start thinking that way." As she walked away, Barron felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. He hadn't set out to inspire anyone, but knowing that his actions had made a difference for even one person was enough. Over time, the events surrounding Barron and Madison began to influence the broader campus culture. Students who had previously felt silenced by the pressure to conform started to speak up, sharing their own perspectives and engaging in more open dialogue. Even Madison began to change. While she remained committed to her principles, she started to approach her teaching with a greater emphasis on fostering genuine discussion rather than enforcing ideological conformity. She encouraged her students to challenge her ideas and explore their own beliefs, creating a classroom environment that was more dynamic and inclusive. One day, as the semester drew to a close, Madison approached Barron after class. "Mr. Trump," she said, her tone softer than usual, "I wanted to thank you for our discussions this semester. You've given me a lot to think about." Barron nodded, his expression respectful. "Thank you, Professor Harper. I've appreciated the opportunity to share my perspective." Madison hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I may not agree with everything you've said, but I've come to realize that inclusivity means more than just enforcing a set of rules. It means creating a space where everyone feels heard, even when we disagree." Barron smiled. "I couldn't agree more." As Madison walked away, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she understood that true progress wasn't about silencing dissent. It was about finding common ground and building bridges. The story of Barron Trump and Professor Madison Harper is a reminder of the power of calm conviction and respectful dialogue. In a world increasingly dominated by performative outrage and ideological conformity, Barron's approach stood out as a beacon of reason and integrity. He didn't seek to tear anyone down or impose his beliefs on others. Instead, he stood by his principles while respecting the rights of others to do the same. And in doing so, he not only earned the respect of his peers, but also inspired meaningful change. For Madison, the experience was a humbling but valuable lesson. It forced her to confront the limitations of her own methods and embrace a more inclusive approach to teaching, one that valued open dialogue and mutual respect over rigid conformity. In the end, the story isn't just about a debate over pronouns or political ideologies. It's about the importance of standing by your principles, even in the face of opposition, and the transformative power of genuine dialogue. Don't you think we need more young people like Barron in today's world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that cut through the noise and focus on what truly matters, be sure to subscribe to this channel for more.